Something is wrong in Annie Guthrie's neighborhood tonight. Deputies are back. No press conference, no announcement, no breakthrough, no arrest, no cameras, no statement from the sheriff. But the patrol cars are there circling, watching, present. And if you have been following the Nancy Guthrie case for the last 73 days, you already know what that means. It means something shifted quietly, without warning, without explanation. And tonight we need to talk about why. Because the real question is not whether this means the case is finally solved. It is not. Nancy is still missing. The suspect is still unnamed. The answers are still buried. The real question is this: why are deputies increasing patrols around the family's orbit now on day 73 when this case is supposed to be going quiet? Let me tell you what we know, and then let me tell you what nobody else is willing to say. Here is what is confirmed. According to reporting relayed by Parade from KVOA, the Puma County Sheriff's Department has increased patrols not only in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, but also in the neighborhood where her daughter Annie Guthrie and son-in-law Tommaso Cioni live. Why? Because residents raised complaints at a homeowners association meeting. Those complaints, according to the report, involved harassment by a YouTuber in the area, and the sheriff's department confirmed they had received similar complaints from Annie regarding her own neighborhood. That is the official reason for the added patrols. Not a new search, not a warrant, not a fresh lead, not a public declaration that investigators found anything, just patrols tied to complaints, tied to disruption. That is what is confirmed. Now, here is why this still matters and why you should not scroll past this update. I already know what some of you are thinking. So what? This is just crowd control. This is nothing. And I understand that reaction. On the surface, this does not sound like the kind of update that cracks a case wide open. It sounds administrative. It sounds boring. It sounds small. But cases like this are not just made of evidence. They are made of environments. And when the environment around a case starts breaking down, investigators lose something they desperately need: clarity. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 70 days. No arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed recovery, no public resolution. That kind of vacuum pulls in everything: speculation, fear, self-appointed detectives, live streamers, people who think they are helping, people who just want attention, people who no longer understand the difference between documenting a story and becoming part of it. And once that happens, the neighborhoods closest to the case stop being neighborhoods. They become stages. That matters more than you think, because the moment residents start to feel harassed in their own homes, watched, followed, questioned, pressured, the case changes shape. Now, investigators are not just trying to solve a disappearance, they're trying to manage fallout, and that is exactly why this update deserves more attention than it first appears to. Let me be clear about what this does not prove. It does not prove deputies found a new lead near Annie's home. It does not prove they are surveilling a suspect there. It does not prove evidence was recovered in that neighborhood. And it does not prove the patrols have anything to do with a renewed focus on Annie or Tommaso themselves. None of that is confirmed. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. But something else is confirmed, and it is the thing nobody is saying out loud. The family's immediate orbit is still sensitive enough that law enforcement is now physically increasing its presence there. And that tells us three things. First, this case is still destabilizing the people closest to it. We already knew NY's disappearance shattered the family emotionally. That part has been visible for weeks. But this update adds something more concrete. The disruption is no longer just emotional, it is geographic. It is physical. Their streets are now part of the pressure field of this case. Second, law enforcement is acknowledging that pressure, and that is huge. Agencies do not increase patrols in multiple neighborhoods for no reason. Even when the reason is not investigative, it still reflects a judgment call. It means the complaints crossed a line. It means this was not one random incident brushed aside. It means it was serious enough to require a physical response. Third, 73 days in, the ecosystem around this case is getting harder to control, not easier. That is the part most people are missing. Normally, as a case ages, the volume fades, the cameras leave, the crowd shrinks, the chaos drops. But according to this reporting, while most traditional news outlets have left the area, a small number of live streamers have stayed. And if those remaining people are creating enough disruption for neighbors to file formal complaints and for patrols to be increased, then this case is still generating active tension on the ground. That is not closure, that is spillover. And spillover changes behavior. Neighbors stop wanting to talk. Residents get defensive. People stop answering doors. They stop separating what they know from what they are tired of. Even innocent activity starts getting filtered through suspicion. That is dangerous in any major investigation, because when noise rises, signal gets buried. Now let me ask the harder question, the one nobody wants to ask. Why Annie's neighborhood too? That is where this gets interesting. If this were only about NY's immediate street, fine, that would make sense. But the reporting says the increased patrols also extended to Annie and Tommaso's neighborhood after similar complaints were made there. Again, we have to be disciplined. That does not mean Annie's neighborhood is some new focal point of the investigation. It does not mean deputies believe the answer is there, but it does mean the family has not been able to step outside this case. The case followed them home, and that matters. In a disappearance investigation, family members are not just grieving relatives, they are nodes. They receive messages, they attract media, they become targets for speculation. In this case, they have been forced to exist in public while the mystery remains unresolved. That combination creates a kind of pressure that almost nothing else matches. So when deputies increase patrols in the daughter's neighborhood, the message is not the case moved there. The message is the perimeter of disruption around this case has expanded. And if you want to understand why that matters, think about what comes next. If a real witness decides to come forward, what environment are they walking into? If a neighbor saw something unusual, are they now more willing to talk or less? If law enforcement needs cooperation from residents, is constant harassment making that easier or harder? That is why this story, even though it sounds smaller than a DNA update or a ransom note, still tells us something important. This case is no longer affecting only the victim and the search. It is affecting the terrain around the search. And once that happens, every serious investigator faces the same problem. How do you protect the integrity of the environment without looking like you reacted too late? Let us be honest, by day 73, this should not be the headline. The headline should be movement in the case itself. A suspect identified, evidence clarified, a search zone narrowed, a note authenticated, a vehicle connected, a forensic result that moves the ball forward. Instead, we are talking about patrols, complaints, harassment. That is not progress. That is what happens when public obsession outruns public information. So, what should you take from this tonight? Here is my view. Do not overread it. There is no confirmation of a new evidence push in Annie's neighborhood. If someone tells you deputies are back because they found something big, that is not confirmed. Be careful, but do not underread it either. When patrols rise around NY's community and Annie's neighborhood at the same time, that is a sign the case is still active enough, disruptive enough, intense enough to require physical management. This update exposes a hidden cost of unresolved cases. The family does not just lose privacy. The community around them loses stability. And if the sheriff's department is now being pulled into managing harassment and neighborhood pressure, that is one more reminder of how long this case has gone without an answer. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The suspect is still unnamed. And now even the spaces around the family are under strain. That is the real story tonight. Not that deputies drove through a neighborhood. Not that neighbors are frustrated. Not that a YouTuber went too far. The real story is that 73 days in, the center of gravity of this case is still strong enough to distort everything around it. That is what unresolved cases do. They do not stay contained. They spread. And if you have been following this story closely, that should concern you deeply, because every day that passes without resolution creates more noise, more pressure, more exhaustion, and more room for the truth to get buried under performance, distraction, and chaos. So, yes, this is not the biggest update we have ever covered in the Nancy Guthrie case, but it is one of the most revealing. It shows where the pressure is. It shows who is living inside it. And it shows that even now, even after all these weeks, the spaces around this family are not calm, they are not settled, and they are not free from what happened to Nancy, which brings us back to the question at the center of this entire video. Why are deputies back in Annie's neighborhood now? If the official answer is harassment complaints, fine. That is the confirmed answer. But the deeper answer may be this. This case is still unresolved enough, loud enough, and unstable enough that law enforcement can no longer treat the surrounding neighborhoods like normal neighborhoods. And until Nancy is found or the suspect is named, that instability is not going anywhere. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1800 call FBI. And I want your take right now in the comments. Do you think this is really just about harassment complaints? Or does the increased patrol presence tell us that the family's neighborhoods are still more central to this case than officials are letting on? Drop your theory below, because on day 73, every detail matters. And tonight, this one might matter more than anyone is admitting. And here's where things get even more complicated. Because when a case reaches this stage, 70-plus days, no answers, rising pressure, investigators are not just fighting time anymore, they are fighting distortion. Every new rumor, every live stream, every theory posted online, it doesn't just add noise, it reshapes the narrative. And once a narrative starts drifting too far from facts, it becomes harder to pull it back. So ask yourself this. If law enforcement is now stepping in to control the environment, not just the investigation, what does that say about what's happening behind the scenes? Because in cases like this, silence is not always inactivity. Sometimes silence means something is being built carefully, quietly, out of public view. And that brings us to a possibility people don't like to consider. What if investigators already know more than they're saying, but releasing it now would do more harm than good? Think about it. If there is a person of interest, if there are ongoing interviews, if there is evidence still being processed, the last thing they want is outside interference contaminating timelines, statements, or behavior. Which means these patrols might not just be about complaints, they might also be about control, control of space, control of movement, control of what happens next. But again, we stay grounded in facts. There is no official confirmation of a suspect, no confirmation of surveillance, no confirmation of a breakthrough, only patterns. And patterns tell stories, if you're paying attention. So now the question shifts again. Not just why are deputies there, but why now? Why day 73? Why when attention was starting to fade? Why when the case was supposed to quiet down? Because sometimes, right before something changes, everything looks still on the surface.